Oh,
I still got 2 feet in my driveway.
I know. Well, you know what? Here's the thing. All 4 of us are out there. We not only had to shovel the driveway, but we had to shovel from our driveway into it's a cul-de-sac, and we never get plowed. So we shoveled literally into the street and on our street up to the main street. And it's just a single lane. There's not going to be either paper or trash pickup or anything. No mail, forget that. And you had to go around the house, get the downspouts out and everything. We were schlepping yesterday.
Yeah, well,
a snowblower.
you didn't shovel it on your lawn. I remember the one in 2003, and it was the end of a very bad drought, and we all shoveled it on our lawns. I mean, the pile of snow was about 10 feet high, but at least our lawns were saved.
Yeah,
and nobody was shoveling it on the street. It was just, let's get this water on our lawn.
No, we were shoveling, of course, onto our lawns, but we had to shovel from our driveway into the street because there's no way to get through the street. God forbid, the pizza delivery guy couldn't make it through.
Oh my God. I was using a big snowblower and it jammed a bunch of times just trying to get through the drift.
Wow.
Also, there's a wet snow. Wet snow.
Yeah, exactly, wet snow.
For snowball fights, not for anything else.
Yes, mashed potatoes. Mashed potatoes, yeah.
You didn't have too much of that down in Alabama, did you?
Oh, but I grew up in Canada. This was, we'd be out there every day, all day snowball fight.
Yeah.
All like this. The difference here is they don't remove it. They just push it around.
Yeah.
I guess it's, it'll melt off. I've lived here long enough to know. But in Montreal, you can get 36 inches of snow the next day. You'll never know. They literally remove it with the giant snowblower.
Well, we're not there yet.
It was good weather for finger donations to the transplant committee.
Oh.
It was terrible. I used to work in emergency rooms, and the number of digits that would come in the snowblower was amazing.
Because they would reach their hand in?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it had jammed, so it wasn't spinning, but there was still pressure in the cylinder. And so when they finally loosened had the ice from blocking it, all of a sudden the thing will kick on.
And with the giant ones, each year in Montreal, we'd have a kid blown out. They're like 4 spirals high, and they have trucks like a caravan following them. And, kids would go out and play in the snowdrifts, and the drivers. That was awful. Anyway.
That's a horrible thought. I want to get that out of my head now, Arnie. What are you talking about?
I mean, we saw
Holy moly, I'm thinking of this poor kid.
Yeah.
Oh.
My background is Meals on Wheels. Hello?
Yeah, I can see that, Alan. Thank you with the bear. Marshall, good to see you. Barbara. Well, I want to change gears here. So, Yoni, hopefully you did not record that first part.
I can cut it out after the fact.
Oh my God!
I didn't know it was happening until it happened.
Oh,
all right, guys.
These emergency room surgeons, I don't want to hear those stories.
I can practice being a virtual mole, and I'll just tip up.
That's the worst, though.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so no one has stories like you have, no doubt. So let's go ahead and recite a blessing. And I think it's a fascinating Torah portion, and a lot of things we're going to do a little bit different today. So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvot v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. We're going to start a new book, the 3rd book of the Torah, the book of Leviticus, Vayikra. And what I wanted to be able to do is incorporate not only what I have from the text, and I've got plenty of wonderful commentaries on the first chapter of the book of Leviticus, of course, making reference to Talmudic passages and Rashi and Chezkuni, etc. But I also wanted to make sure that you're familiar with some of the resources by the Union for Reform Judaism and CCAR, etc. Primarily because the one article that I saw written by an old friend of Susan and mine, Professor Rabbi Deborah Weisberg, who is a professor at Hebrew Union College of Rabbinics. And she has written just a wonderful introduction to the idea of sacrifices. Now, a lot of us, we think, oh, Genesis has these wonderful narratives. I mean, you can't beat those. They're with the family dynamics. And Exodus has this drama of our children of Israel as we were enslaved in Egypt, and then the heroic actions by Moses and Miriam and Aaron, and the giving of the 10 Commandments, and then the revelation at Mount Sinai. I mean, these are great stories and magnificent pieces. And now we're ready for the third chapter. And what's going to build after that? And it's talking about, well, there's the Olah sacrifice and the Mincha sacrifice and the Chatat sacrifice and the Shlamim sacrifice. And you can do it with a calf, or you can do it with a bull, or you can do it with a sheep, or with a goat, or with a dove, or with the, and you're thinking, I got this for the whole book is like this. Now, actually, in chapter 19 of Leviticus, there happens to be perhaps one of the most, if not the most significant expression of Judaism in the entire Torah. Now, that's in the middle of Leviticus. But there's a lot of sacrifices in the meanwhile. And just as Arnie was regaling us with some of his emergency room surgery, gory details of poor things that happened, there's some gory details in Leviticus that you go, oi, really? So Devorah Weisberg, she has this wonderful introduction, and I wanted to bring it to you. And at first I went ahead and I copied it and I put it in my paper. And then I thought, you know what? With the magic of the internet, I could take you right to that website, and you can see for yourself. And you can also see some of the other things that are there. So who wants to go on the internet with me? Okay, good. All right, Lori. So this piece that you can see, this is, I want to show you up the very top. This is reformjudaism.org, which is filled with wonderful programs, analysis, learning opportunities, etc. You can see Jewish holidays, Reformed Jewish life, belief and practices, learning. Each of these have wonderful pieces, a whole big thing about Passover, Reformed Jewish life, arts, food, recipes. I'll be utilizing this for some of the class that I'll be teaching on Sunday, the Passover prep class. This website also brings us right to the Union for Reform Judaism, which has everything about the various congregations. So if you want to say, where is a Reformed congregation, for instance, in this state or that state, you type it in and there you go. It has Jewish calendar, what we do, congregational life, social justice, what we believe, who we are, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a whole thing with the Reform Religious Action Center as well. So lots of material here. Now, this is complemented by another website called, on the CCAR, the Central Conference of American Rabbis. We're not going to go to that right now, but I just wanted to show you this. This is, again, reformjudaism.org. And going down, this has, where it says this week's Torah portion. Is everyone following me? You don't have to mute. Can everyone follow me?
Yes.
Yay. Okay, good. Because I'm yammering on here. I don't know if anyone's here. So, because I'm not in my room anymore, I, by the magic of the internet, am all the way in New York where they're doing this website. Isn't that amazing? Okay, a little magical. So here's Vayikra, one of the pieces that they'll have little essays about this week's Torah portion. And I wanted to get down, so I'm going to open this up. And you can see there's some analysis, there's the passage, a summary of the sacrifice, etc. I want to get down here to where I had mentioned Rabbi Devorah Weisberg's piece, which was terrific. And I thought, and you can have this, by the way, this 10 minutes of Torah, you can have this sent to your home And so you get it every week. Does anyone here get that? Well, you're eligible for it because you're a member of Temple Sinai, and a member of a Reformed congregation has it for you. And so I hope that you'll look at it. So anyway, this is what Devorah had to say. The power of sacrifice then and now. Can you read this at all? Is it too small? Anybody?
Too small.
All right, that's a problem, isn't it? Okay, so I have it, like I said, I have in the other. Is there a way of getting that bigger? What do you think, Yoni? Is there a way of?
Yeah, I think try holding a control and then the plus button or command and the plus button. That might zoom in on the screen.
I'm going to do that. Oh, look at you.
There we go.
Isn't he a genius?
Oh, thank you.
Hey, I was control plus. God bless him. Is that big enough? Please say yes. Please say that's big enough, guys, will you?
It's close.
Yes.
All right, I'll do one more. Hold on.
It's readable.
How's that?
That's much better.
All right, thank you. God bless you. All right, so who is complaining the most gets to read first.
All right, you got it. The book of Leviticus assumes that offerings of animals and grain, sometimes accompanied by libations of wine or oil, are appropriate expressions of gratitude towards God and mechanisms through which one atones for sin. Vayikra, the opening paragraph of Leviticus, offers Israel instructions on the proper way to offer sacrifices both individually and as a community. These instructions include a list of various types of voluntary and mandated offerings, the proper animals for each type of offering, and the steps involved in those offerings. At first glance, it is challenging to find meaning or inspiration in this parsha. The idea of slaughtering animals, dashing their blood on an altar, and burning portions of their flesh seems pointless at best and offensive at worst. To appreciate this material, we need to look past the mode of sacrifice to the intention behind it. While the former may no longer resonate with us, the latter certainly does. What were the Israelites trying to accomplish through animal sacrifice? Simply put, they were trying to reach beyond the known to communicate with the unknown, with the divine. In Hebrew, the generic word for an offering is karban, which includes the root krb, to draw near. The sacrificial system was designed to allow every Israelite to draw near to God. Prescribed offerings assume that there were times when the person needed to reconnect with God. Voluntary offerings provided individuals freedom to initiate or deepen that sense of connection. The diverse types of offerings also attest to the variety of ways we might imagine and connect with God. The Olah offering was wholly burnt on the altar, symbolizing and concretizing the desire to give fully of oneself to the divine. Other offerings were partly burnt on the altar and partly consumed by the individual who brought it, connecting them to God through a shared meal.
Okay, let's stop there just for a second. Thank you, Jerry. Because she's addressing something that we experience it every year. As I mentioned, we come to the book of Leviticus, all these sacrifices, and it's foreign to us. The temple in Jerusalem was destroyed in the year 70 of the Common Era, nearly 2,000 years ago. To be accurate, 1,950 years ago. So it was it's beyond our comprehension as to what that would be and what would be like. Although at the time, every faith that we are aware of throughout the Hellenistic world, certainly the Greeks and the Romans, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Persians, every other cult out there, every other nation, every other faith had some form of sacrificial worship. And that wasn't just in the old world. Here in the Americas as well, they had sacrificial systems, including sacrificing people. That was a major part of it. And by the way, sacrificing people was also known to have happened in Carthage along the northern African coast of the Mediterranean. So we know that there were sacrifices all over. What was amazing is that in Judaism, we limited the sacrifices to one place, Hamakom Asher Yivchar Adonai, a place where God would choose, as opposed to having altars everywhere. Originally, it was you'd have wherever you were, you could build an altar. That's what Abraham and the patriarchs and matriarchs did. But ultimately, it was no. It's just in one place you'll have it, and everywhere else you have just prayer. That was one big piece. And then after the destruction of the temple, there again were thoughts. Well, do we just build a temple someplace else? Right? We had a temple at the Temple of Onias in Elephantine in Egypt, and there were some other thoughts that we could build it here or there. But the answer was no. We're sort of done with the sacrifices. And so the rabbis made a choice that, you know what, even the sacrifices that we are aware of were out of the ordinary experiences of most of our people, because they were all only in Jerusalem. You would only experience them when you would come on a pilgrimage. You wouldn't go on a pilgrimage all the time, perhaps only once or twice in a lifetime. That you would be able to get to Jerusalem and be there, especially if you weren't living in the land of Israel. If you were in Alexandria or in Persia or in Babylon or in northern or in southern Europe, how in the heck are you going to get all the way to Jerusalem? I mean, that was a major undertaking. So the rabbis already said, you know what, we have a different way of making offerings. We have the avodah shebalev, the offering of our heart, as opposed to the actual physical offering. But what Professor Devorah Weisberg is trying to get us to understand is that tactile, physical participation by the one bringing the offering, as they brought it near, calling the sacrifice itself a korban, that which is brought near. And as you'll see in the text itself, it says, when a person comes near, karov alecha, when it comes near to the altar to bring it, there is a physical expression and participation in this act. Also, not infrequently, the person would make the offering from their own flock, their herd, their crops. They would put the crops they were bringing, their first fruits, into a basket, physically bring it. They would, from the herd, from the flock, they would bring their offering to Jerusalem, to the priests. So this was something that they raised, nurtured, grew personally. And that also added a depth of significance. Even if they were in an urban setting and they didn't have flocks or herds or crops, they nevertheless would go, and that's why you had the money changers, etc., at the temple, and you would exchange whatever currency you had for the appropriate amount, and you would purchase then a lamb for the sacrifice for Passover, etc., so that what you brought was yours. You had a stake in it. So Devorah Weisberg is bringing us a world that is beyond our comprehension, because we're 2,000 years removed from it. And yet it was the only thing most people around the world had any familiarity with for the longest of times. And so when we read it, we have to sort of allow ourselves to be free from our contemporary assumptions and put ourselves back into that ancient time. So before I wanted to go back into the second part of Devorah's excellent introduction, wanted to see if you had any thoughts or questions about this. All at once. None? Okay, good. There we go.
What, you asking for somebody to read?
No, okay, yes.
Okay, I'll read.
Okay, thank you. And we are right where it says, what are the key lessons we can take from this parasha?
What key lessons we can take for, okay. First, consider the makeup of offerings. Some offerings require animals, while others make use of mixtures of flour, grains, oil, and frankincense, which is made from raisin. Israelite offerings therefore include things in their natural state and things that have been processed by human beings. Our relationship with God can be mediated through both the natural world and through the work of our hands. We can experience God, we can both through nature, creation, and through our own acts of production and creativity. Second, while offerings were presented by the priest, every Israelite could bring offerings on their own behalf. In the Torah, a woman's commentary,
Tamara Ashkenazi.
yeah, I had my hand over the, okay, oops. I lost to see, on the content, Ezekiel notes that the word Adam in Leviticus should be understood not as a man who presents an offering, but as a human being, meaning women could also bring offerings. Each of us, regardless of our gender identity, can connect with the divine.
Right. And actually, some of the classic commentators mention that as well. The use of the word Adam here, not just Ish, although it goes back and forth. And yet the fact is both a man and a woman and a Jew and one who is not Jewish all were permitted to bring an offering. There was some differentiation as to who would be qualified to put the hands on the animal, because that was a part of the process. But women too were permitted to participate in that. Go ahead, where it says this equality is reinforced. Alan, you're on mute though, buddy. Alan? Okay.
Now you could hear me. This equality is reinforced by Midrash, Tahum, Viagra, by Yakra. 5 points out that the word used for a person in Leviticus is nefesh, which also means life. This asserts that when a person brings even an offering of flour or grain, the least costly of offerings could respond to God, to the offering as if the individual had offered their own life.
Right. And we'll see this as well throughout the piece as we read the first chapter of Leviticus and onward. There's always an alternative for those who could not afford a ram or a goat or a calf. And so there's not an exclusion by economic status. So who would like to read this last little passage here?
I can read, Rabbi.
Would you please? Thank you, Lori. Lori, now you're out now.
Okay.
All right. Let me just go.
I
Laura,
I think it was Linda that was going to read.
Well, whoever was, then whomever, just start reading.
Okay.
Okay, it was me. I'm sorry. I thought you said Arnie. I don't know what's wrong with my camera. It should be on, but it's not. Finally, sacrifice offered a concrete avenue for relating to an unseen and unknowable being. We understandably view prayer as a more civilized mode of connecting to the divine than animal sacrifice. However, when we let go of our discomfort with the sacrificial system for a moment, we can acknowledge the power it held for the Israelites. The very elements that disturb us, and may have disturbed some ancients, make sacrifice so visceral and captivating. When an individual was overcome with guilt or shame, they were able to experience a deeply restorative sense of relief from placing their hands on an animal, seeing its blood on the altar, and knowing that this ritual explained their sin. Just as we derive satisfaction from giving a gift to someone who has helped us, a person who felt profound gratitude to God derived satisfaction from giving God something tangible. While we will never turn to animal offerings to reach out to God, the opening chapters of Leviticus ask us to consider what it means to strive to connect with the divine and how we imbue our religious experience with power and meaning.
That's wonderful. Great. So I'm going to stop right there. And Linda, thank you. And I did, again, your camera's not on, but we were able to hear your voice strongly. So
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with my camera, but no big deal. You don't need to see me.
was wonderful. It would be nicer, but regardless. So the idea what Weisberg was bringing is that even though our initial reaction might be negative, or at the very least that this is too strange and out of our experience and it has nothing to do with it, it doesn't relate to me, right? It can relate to us, and we can most certainly see it when we have something very personally affecting us that we wish to express, not with a platitude, not with a hallmark sentiment, but rather with something that viscerally connects our experience, our feeling with the world and with God. And it might be a quote unquote a chatat or a sin offering, which is probably best translated as purification offering, because when I have a sin, something happens to me that sets me off balance. I need to get back into that which is fully connected and in balance with the world. And so I'm looking for something that will help me experience that. The same thing for a Thanksgiving offering, the same thing for the fulfillment of a vow offering. And the personal offerings were the ones that are so significant in Jerusalem. There were the communal offerings that happened all the time, the Tamid offerings, for instance. And we'll talk about that a little bit on the Sinai Sundays for the offerings for Passover, and whether or not they superseded Shabbat. We'll get to that in another couple of days. But the personal offerings by an individual were the ones that were so meaningful. And that's where I wanted us to sort of think, I have some of the more powerful times that I have with an individual or with small groups of individual will be at times like the healing service that we have, where it's not just open up a book and, I read, you read, we sing, there's, sit up, stand out. It's a person holding a Torah and offering something personally from their heart to share. That comes pretty close to what we're talking about with the sacrificial system. And go ahead, Arnie, and then Marshall.
Rabbi, I'm just wondering, do you think that the animal sacrifice, in other words, the mystique of the life and death, similarly, like, with the cultures that humans sacrificed humans, was it that, or just the animals happened to be a possession?
Okay, your audio cut out.
Well, I'm just wondering, do you think that the animal part of it was the mystique of life and death, or was it just something that was a possession?
It was right. It was two things. One, I think that the drama of taking a life, an animal, especially one that you, again, maybe have helped give birth to, right? You helped to, to bring that calf from its mother and protected it, fed it, nurtured it through its life. So to see that all the way through that whole life cycle, I'm sure that had a very dramatic impact on the giver. But then again, we have to note that a lot of the offerings were of the grain that I brought, the first fruits that I brought. So you didn't have the blood and the gore, and those were also very significant. From Passover on, the offering that we have is of the Omer, the harvest of the barley. That was what was brought to the temple. And there are also a lot of the offerings, and we had this at the very end of this first chapter in Leviticus, the offering of either the torim or the yonah, the turtle dove or the pigeon that was brought to as an offering. And a lot of you had those dove coats. You saw those dove coats, those pigeon coats in Israel. We all saw those, right? And those were most common too. An individual wouldn't necessarily bring an entire animal, but he or she might bring a dove. And it obviously has a lot less gore. There's an interesting comment about that in just a little bit. So I think it was more of just what I possess, I'm giving personally, but certainly there was more drama when it came to an animal, which is why groups of families would come together, put their resources in to have an actual lamb that was brought. Some of the offerings, one of the offerings, the olah, was burnt up entirely on the altar. But for the most part, the animal, only parts were put on the altar, and the rest of it was consumed by the priestly families. And in the case of the Passover offering, the Paschal lamb, that was primarily consumed by the family itself. Marshall and then Barbara.
Was there a hierarchy of animals or plants in order, what you're saying, excuse me, the greater the sin feels to you that you're offering a sacrifice? Is there a hierarchy of that in plants, or even if it's animals or plants, but even what it means to you?
Yeah,
which way do you go?
Yeah, that's a very good question. When we go through this text, you'll see that there are specific occasions in which it'll say, for this you need a ram, or for that, or when they say ram, it can either be from the herd, from the flock, either a goat or a sheep. For this you need a calf. So it'll be more prescriptive as to what exactly you'll need. But was there a value difference that my sins are completely forgiven because I brought this really fine animal and you only brought a pear, right? Or a plum, right? So I don't think it was quite that way, but then again, humans are humans. They would, some would bring their offerings in these beautiful gold baskets, and others, they had a knapsack, right? Does that make it better? Humans like to measure that. I don't think God cared, but Barbara, go ahead.
I have a question. I don't know a lot about koshering meat, but doesn't the koshering involve pulling out the blood?
Right, it does.
So is that based on the ancient sacrificial?
There were people and are people to this day who consume animal blood. One of the favorite sausages in Europe is
blood sausage.
Blood sausage. Because for a Jew, normally you just go, oy, oy. It's like corned beef on white bread with mayonnaise. You don't do that. Who ate that, right? So, but they love it. What can you say? So my kids always taught me, don't yuck someone else's yum. So, okay, but we don't eat blood. And so we not only drain it, but we also salt it. And so we try to remove it. And there's a role for the blood that you will read about in just a second as well. a very elaborate piece. So let me get to the text, unless anyone else has a question. Okay, good. So that experiment works, don't you think? They don't say anything. All right, so here's the very beginning I wanted to point out, and now I'll make this text even larger. Yay, good. You can see here, this is the very first word of the third book of the Torah, Vayikra. That happens to be the name of the book itself in Hebrew. It's called Vayikra. We call it Leviticus because it has a lot of the laws concerning the Levitical family, including the Kohanim. But you can notice here that the aleph is very small, right? And so some of the commentators ask, well, why is this aleph a little small? And there's obviously some kind of origin, and yet there's lots of midrashim trying to explain it. So what happened? Vayikra el Moshe v'diber Adonai elav me'ohel mo'ed lemor, and Adonai spoke to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, this is Balaturim, who is going to go on about the small aleph. So who would like to read the small aleph?
I'll read it.
Go, please, Barbara.
Okay, are we starting at the top or?
Yeah, so where it says Balaturim.
Balaturim, okay. And he called. The aleph is written as a small letter because Moshe wanted to write.
Vayikar, and it happened.
And it happened. The way it is written regarding Balaam, which implies God appeared to him only as a chance occurrence. God, however, told him to write the aleph, which indicates his love, but Moshe made it small.
So another idea is, and this harkens back to what Marshall Tobin was asking about the offering being, or maybe it was Arnold, significant because it was something that a person owned. That when you own something, right, and you give it away, say an act of tzedakah or a donation, in theory, you're diminished, i.e. I had this, but now I've taken some of what I had and I've given it away, so I should be smaller. But in fact, I'm not smaller. After I do something, give of myself, give of my possessions, give of my time, instead of feeling smaller or reduced, in fact, I feel greater. And that phenomenon is also played out with this small aleph, the aleph being the first letter of Anochi, or Ani, I. When I make myself smaller for the benefit of others, I am not smaller, but I make myself, in fact, bigger. So here, Barbara, if you'll continue, this is the second through the fourth lines of Leviticus.
Adonai called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when any of you presents an offering of cattle to Adonai, he shall choose his offering from the herd or from the flock. If his offering is a burnt offering from the herd, he shall make his offering a male without blemish. He shall bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting for acceptance in his behalf before Adonai. He shall lay his hand upon the head of the burnt offering, that it may be acceptable in his behalf in expiation for him.
Good. Now here again, the coming near, the bringing near, here we find the verb V'amarta aleichem, and say to them, Adam ki yakriv mikem, a person who comes near. So I've got from Chagiga, the Talmudic passage, an interesting riff on that. Arnie, go ahead, please, first.
Rabbi, can I ask a question? When
Yes,
you
sir.
brought your offering, I mean, there's no question that psychologically, kind of confessing is a way to clear yourself, your mind, etc. Anybody who has a conflict of guilt, that's the first thing they recommend. Christianity took it a step further with the confessional. But in Judaism, when I brought my offering, and let's say it was because I snubbed Alan, would I have to declare that to the priest as I handed him the lamb? I'm just curious. I mean, was there a
Did you have to confess what you did? Oh, that's a darn good question. I'm not aware of it because we don't have third-party confessions for the most part. I don't have the power as a rabbi, and I don't think the priests had any power either to win your forgiveness from someone that you've harmed. We know this from Yom Kippur. What do we have to do?
Personally.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to talk to that person.
Right.
Now that person may reject it, may say, no, you know what? It's over. We're done. And that happens. There are people who don't want a reconciliation, but you tried. And that was that effort that is, gosh, talk about a sacrifice, giving of yourself. But maybe someone has a different awareness of some text. I am not aware of the power of a priest or a rabbi to forgive you until you've done something, until you've won the forgiveness of the person that you've harmed.
That's man to man. I'm just talking about like I ate treif. When I came
with God, yeah. That's a different story. But again, that's not between, rabbi can't say, oh, that was all right. Tell you the truth, I like that shrimp too. Right. I don't think
it's a personal thing. I would bring my lamb. Priest wouldn't say, and why is this? What's this for?
Right. That's not a part of the deal. But again, who cares who this priest was? Who cares who that rabbi is? That means nothing. What means is what you are in relationship to God. And if you know the sincerity of it, it's irrelevant if I think it's important or not. It's what I can do, what the priest should have been able to do, was to help you feel that what you're doing is a significant connection with God, right? Is this authentic, sincere expression, and only you are the one who knows that. So it would be presumptuous of me to say, well, I can tell you're not sincere. How the hell would I know? Right? So let's. Chizkuni, I've got a lot from Chizkuni, but it's really good stuff. So who'd like to read it from him?
I can.
Would you please? Thank you, Kathy.
Chizkuni, Adam, anyone. This ambiguous description is intended to convey that what follows applies not only also to converts to Judaism, but even to people who are Gentiles, although in this paragraph, only Israelites are addressed. The exclusive meaning of the word Adam here is made plain when the Torah adds the restrictive word mikem, from amongst you. This means that what follows applies only to members of the Jewish people. However, seeing that we have a rule that whenever the Torah writes two successive restrictive clauses, this is meant to include someone or something, not to exclude it. The sages understood our verse as the Torah including even Gentiles as qualified to offer sacrifices to Hashem using the facilities offered by the priests, but paying for the animals they authorized to be offered on their behalf. This is based also on when the Torah writes, Ish, any man, including idolaters who vow to sacrifice to who vow to offer a sacrifice to the God of the Israelites.
Right. So I think that was so significant. And so what Tamar Ashkenaz pointed out in the women's commentary was that it included anyone, i.e. of any gender. But what I had mentioned, and following off of Chizkuni, the 13th century France, is that it meant anybody. And we had offerings from people all over, where the prophetic statement, "My house shall be a house of prayer for all peoples," was a vision that anyone in this world would be encouraged to come and connect with God in this way. There are certain sacrifices that were directed specifically for the Israelite people, for the Jewish people. Other sacrifices were for anybody to come and to bring them. Chizkuni continues on. Kathy, would you?
Sure. Mikam from amongst you. The prefix letter mem reminds us.
Mem. Good.
Yeah, I know that. Reminds us that not all of us are addressed here. On the one hand, even absolute Gentile idolaters are welcome to present an offering to Hashem, which will be burnt up on the altar in the temple, as we do not wish to alienate Gentiles that are seeking for a religion of truth. On the other hand, by the same token, Jewish renegades who wish to offer such sacrifices in the temple are rebuffed by the Torah, as what they do would be akin to blasphemy, seeing they demonstrate by their daily conduct that they do not believe in the power of our God.
Right. So while if you're not Jewish, you're certainly welcome. But if you're one of those who scoffs at it and mocks it, don't mock us. If you come with sincerity, regardless of your faith, you're welcome. And you may be a pagan. You may be a Roman who sacrifices to the pantheon. But we would not exclude anyone except for those who would mock it, and among our own people. And then if you continue on, please.
Okay. Im olah korbano, if his offering consists of an animal to be burned up completely, the priest not eating any parts of it. What is meant is that the donor had stipulated this prior to handling the animal to the priest to slaughter on his behalf. The reason why the burnt offering is the first example of animal offerings mentioned in the Torah is that it is the type of offering most welcomed by Hashem.
Now, that's a strange comment that they would have, but why would that be the one most favored? Primarily because it was consumed fully on the altar. The priests who would offer it would have no stake in it. They wouldn't be taking the choices cut for themselves. The person who brought it would not be getting some of it back. Rather, it was a complete offering. This is all for you, God, and I'm not expecting anything back. And that was at least from Chizkuni and also from the Talmudic perspective, the greatest of the offerings, giving something without expecting anything back. And then Yakrivanu.
Okay, he will be able to offer it after the building of the tabernacle has been completed. The owner must first sanctify it, for example, add when handing over the sacrificial animal, this I have vowed to offer as a burnt offering for the Lord.
Right, that's all he has to say. And this was back to Arnie. You just have to say, this I'm bringing to as a sacrifice to God. I don't have to say I'm bringing it because I cheated at cards last night. Okay, and then finally, Lirtzono.
In order to find favor in his eyes. The reason is that this is a voluntary offering, not a thanksgiving offering or a guilt or sin offering, all of which are mandatory offerings.
Right, right. So there are different kind of offerings. Lirtzono, that is given for his behalf. I'm not bringing this because I was commanded. I'm bringing this because I wanted to. In fulfillment of a vow, it could be in fulfillment of a thanksgiving that, oh my gosh, I'm getting married, or I had this wonderful thing happen to my family, and I want to bring this as a celebration. And not to draw the full connection, but at a synagogue, in a modern synagogue, we have dues. Those are the tamid offerings. Those are the half shekel offerings that have to be brought. Those are the mandatory. But as you can see, any month when you look at the kesher, there are hundreds and hundreds of donations that are fully voluntary. So much so, and Wendy, as past president, knows, as we've gone through the list, and Marshall Tobin as past president, that people would create fund after fund and say, here's a special fund for this, and here's a special fund for that. And it's just an expression of their heart, of their sincerity, of their gift of spirit. And that's how most people are. They're not bringing something just as out of obligation. They're bringing it out of their love. I want to get back to the text, but before we go, I wanted to get to some of your thoughts. Barbara.
Just really fast, would the priests be particular as to whose offering they might take back to consume? Like who made the offering? Would they?
That's a good question. No,
I mean, if a Gentile made an offering, would a priest accept that for his own?
Every offering had to be brought to the altar, right? So It's not like he says, "Okay, bring that one to the altar. That one put in my closet." Although there's some wonderful midrashim that we're going to get to. Please join me on Sunday, because some of those questions are brought out, because as the rabbis got further and further along, they looked at some of the corruption. There was corruption by the priesthood. There was corruption in the temple.
I'm shocked.
Right. Right. So, and by the way, it wasn't just because the rabbis versus the priests. Within the priestly families themselves, there were battles. And so we see some of that sectarian battle between priests in the Qumran Dead Sea Scroll material. One priestly class saying, "Oh, those other priests, they're not doing it right, they're corrupted," et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, theoretically, anything that was brought, they would bring it to the altar. It's just that the entire offering was not brought to the altar and consumed by fire. A part of the sacrifice was consumed on the altar. Mostly the fat. Because it would burn easily. They wouldn't sacrifice they wouldn't put on the altar the hide. They would flay the hide, and that would be of the position of the priestly class, and we'll get to that in some wonderful passages on Sunday, with the exception of the whole offering. Again, that was offered by whole. So any other, before we get to this next section?
Yes.
Yeah, please, Alan.
Would the priest say, Morris, I had lamb last week, can't you give me something else?
Well, look, there was one, maybe there was, that would be a common thing for if you had altars all over the place. And Yoni and I were talking not too long ago about one of the altars that was in Arad in Israel. I don't think we went down to Arad, but maybe in this next trip to Israel, we'll go down to it. It's a place where very few tourists go, but it's awesome. It really is very cool. And it's a real Israelite altar before the time when Josiah made Jerusalem exclusive. And Yoni used to hang out there, right?
Yeah, they built a bar next to the museum, so.
No, but here, right? But so is you can go and you're walking into this ancient city where the altar was, and the originals they've taken back to Jerusalem for the Israel Museum, but you can see it. What the archaeologists would call in situ, so you can see exactly how it was. Now, those ultimately would have been made passé once Jerusalem was confirmed by Josiah. But to your point, Barbara, or no, to Alan, when there were altars all over the place, maybe the local priest would have said, "Oi, lamb again?" But in Jerusalem, there's only one altar, so there's all kinds of animals being brought all the time. Okay, let's try to see where else we got here. And this last little piece, Barbara, it was a Kathy. Kathy, you were doing such a good. Lifnei Adonai.
In the presence of the Lord. Even though the donor may not enter the sacred precincts of the temple, his gift is described as in the presence of the Lord, seeing it is not his personal fault that he could not enter these precincts. According to Sifra, after having placed his hands on the sacrificial animal outside those precincts, he is allowed to do this once more inside the sacred precincts.
Right. So even though he didn't actually sacrifice it, it was the way he held on to it. And then real quick, the bull shall be slaughtered before Adonai, and Aaron's sons and the priests shall offer the blood, dashing the blood against all sides of the altar, which is on the entrance of the tent of meeting. The burnt offering shall be flayed and cut up into sections. Sons of Aaron, the priest, shall put fire on the altar, lay wood on the fire. Aaron's sons and the priests shall lay out the sections with the head, the soot or the fat on the wood that is on the fire of the altar. So that was the main part that was burned up, was the head and the fat. Its entrails and legs shall be washed with water, and the priest shall turn the whole into smoke on the altar as a burnt offering, an offering by fire, pleasing odor to Adonai. If his offering for the burnt offering is from the flock or of sheep or of goats, he shall make the offering a male without blemish. It shall be slaughtered before Adonai on the north side of the altar, and Aaron's sons, the priest, shall dash its blood against all sides of the altar. When it has been cut into sections, the priest shall lay them out with the head and the soot on the wood that is on the fire of the altar. The entrails and legs shall be washed with water. The priest shall offer up and turn the whole into smoke on the altar. It is a burnt offering, an offering by fire, pleasing odor to Adonai. That's the one, the olah, the complete offering. So obviously you just can't put a big carcass on the altar. They had to cut it up into sections to help it burn. And if the offering is a burnt offering of birds, he shall choose among the turtle doves or pigeons. So I wanted to get to what Rabbeinu Bachya has to say about this. So can I get someone who will read this little piece from Rabbeinu Bachya?
From the turtle doves or the pigeons, according to the plain meaning of text, the Torah first mentions the fully grown birds of species. Example, the turtle doves. As they made and represent the attachment of Jewish people to its partner, i.e. God. It is remarkable fact that when a female turtle dove has lost its mate, it will never mate again.
So dvekut is the clinging, the connection with, and in the spiritual expressions of Kabbalah, dvekut is one of the ultimate goals, a full connection with God. And so the Rabbeinu Bachya draws the analogy between the relationship that the turtle doves have with their mate, and that we would have with God, and that we would have with our own mate. And then, Alan, if you'll continue, please.
I lost where I'm at.
That's right. Arnie, would you read that similarly?
Similarly, Israel, having once, I'm sorry, yeah, all right. Similarly, Israel, having once established an intimate relationship with God, will never exchange him for any other deity. This is the reason why underage doves are not considered as fit to serve as an offering. On the other hand, mature pigeons are not fit to serve as an offering, as they have developed a sense of jealousy, having mated and therefore represent the opposite of attachment. Jealousy is the cause of separation, friction, etc. It is not a characteristic we wish to draw attention to when offering a sacrifice to God. When pigeons are offered, the halakha insists that they be young ones, which have not yet mated. The reason that the Torah did not permit chickens to serve as sacrifices, although they are pure birds and serve as our food, is because they mate indiscriminately, unlike the turtle doves and pigeons. Neither roosters nor hens keep faith with their partners.
I found that so important, because I kept thinking, I knew about the turtle doves, I knew about the pigeons, etc. I kept thinking, what about chicken? I mean, what Jewish table is complete without some kind of chicken? And it was Rabbeinu Bachya who explained. I go, oh, isn't that neat? You know, because chickens are too randy. I don't know. Go ahead.
How do you know if they made it or not? You know, that's being picky, I think. Oh, this wasn't mated. Give me another bird.
Arnie, go ahead.
Yeah, John, you're gonna have to cut this out. I'm just trying to envision the altar up there. Where was the slaughtering? Was it done adjacent to the altar? Was it done on a post-mortem table? I'm just curious. They must have been covered in blood by the end.
Oh, sure. Oh, for sure.
God. Okay.
Yeah.
Whew. All right.
Who else? Okay, I want to get to this thing with Barbara. Did you have something to mention?
I just, this is just a modern thought. I have bird feeders out back, and whenever we have the doves out there, they're always in pairs.
Yeah, right. And I thought that what a perceptive thing that he drew. But I never thought about it with chickens. And the chickens, they don't care. They go around, you know. So there's one other little piece about the offering of the bird, because again, if you're you know, bourgeois, if you're the middle class or upper middle class, you bring from the flock, from the herd, and you bring it, and you're proud. But you don't have anything. You don't have, but you have enough for a turtle dove, right? And you can buy that. Now, if you don't even have enough for that, you just bring a handful of flour that is brought. And it's not any kind of flour, it's choice flour, but it's affordable for just by anybody. And if you don't have enough to do that, it's our obligation to give you enough money so that you can make an offering of flour, so everyone can participate. But here you're bringing your dove, and someone else is bringing the, you know, the big herd or flock sacrifice. And this is what he's got. This last little piece here. This is what Rashi says. Barbara, why don't you read that?
Sure. Yes, means actually the feathers, not the wings.
Oh, I'm sorry. Bichnafav. Okay.
Sorry.
The last piece. The priest shall bring to the altar. This talking about the turtle dove or the pinch off its head, turn it into smoke on the altar, and its blood shall be drained against the side of the altar. He shall remove its crop and its contents and cast it onto the place of the ashes, the east side of the altar. Right. The priest shall tear it open by its wings without severing it and turn it into smoke on the altar. And his whole thing is verse 17 was that it was bichnafav, that it was brought with its wings, right? Put on the wood and the fire. It's a burnt offering, offering by fire, pleasing odor. And
so is that modern day koshering? That's what it seems like.
Well, no, look, it's very sensitive. See what Rashi points out.
Okay. Means actually the feathers, not the wings. But surely you will not find even a common sort of man who can smell the odor of burnt feathers without being disgusted with it. Why then does scripture say that it shall be offered with the feathers, in order that the altar should appear full up, as it were, and adorned with the sacrifice of the poor, since the bird with its feathers make a finer show than without them?
Right. So if they plucked it, you know, the bird isn't like this, but the feathers, it's like that. And if they plucked it, it would look even smaller than it is. They said, no. It's okay. It's a terrible smell, but you want this person, even though they don't have enough means to offer a big sacrifice, at least make them feel good about this. Present it nicely. Present it so that it looks like it's full on the altar. And I thought that was so beautiful. Now, as we go through the rest of this parasha, you'll see again offerings. It says if they don't have enough for this offering, they can use that. And if they don't have enough for that, then they can use something even more affordable. A great sensitivity to make sure that wealth did not exclude anyone from participating. That any person, any man, any woman, any person among you, Jew or Gentile, should feel that they could come and bring this as an offering to God. And I thought, there's something to that. Anybody? All right. You're dumbfounded.
Well, it's Reform Judaism at its best.
Exactly. Exactly. We keep thinking of the exclusive that, oh, it's only the Hoydemakers and, only the big shots here. No. Judaism has always been sensitive to make sure that anybody and everybody has a place, right? And even the Gentiles. So I'll give you the closest example, then we're going to close off because Yoni's thinking, oh my God, I got 1,000 other things to do. So I'm sorry. But so there are those, when we have a grandparent or two grandparents or whatever who are not Jewish, and when I welcome them to the Bima, not to say the Torah blessings, but I will have them up there as we bring the Torah out, and they're handing the Torah to their children and to their grandchildren. And people say, wait a minute, but if they're not Jewish, why are they handing the Torah? Because if it wasn't for their support, their love, and they're here for this bar bat mitzvah, for goodness sakes, none of us would be here, right? Their role is to be honored. Their participation should be respected and honored. And so I think the precedence being set by our ancestors in the temple to saying anybody who wants to come, regardless of their faith, they should be respected and honored and welcomed. Okay? They're all Reform Jews.
It's like in the old days when we dressed up to go to temple. Some people cannot afford a suit, whatever. So you don't want to embarrass them.
That's exactly
and says a suit is meaningful over a shirt and a pair of dungarees.
I agree. Anyway, I want to thank Yoni again for helping you through. And we got that experiment. We already went online. It was pretty amazing, right? I did want to mention that we have on Thursday Lunch and Learn. And then we have Parashat Shavua next Tuesday. A lot of things. Just look at the daily docket. For goodness sakes, there's a lot of wonderful programs on. Yoni, anything specific we got to mention?
I was just going to say, if anyone has not yet watched the event from the cell, it closes tonight at midnight. So we opened that for viewing on Sunday at noon, and you can still view it with the password through tonight, but it does after midnight tonight, we lose access to it.
Yeah, it's terrific. Really a wonderful analysis of what's going on in American politics and international politics. Wonderful stuff, guys. Thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you, if it's possible, on Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yoni.